Mexico.Cesar Hernandez. I work for ESPN and I cover Mexican soccer, American soccer, and whether that be, El Tri, whether it be the U.S. Women's National Team. Sometimes it's even USL. Sometimes it's me even going to Mexico City and covering a fourth division team that I'm really curious about in Mexico City. But anything and everything Mexican American soccer.
Cool. All right. So, where I want to start is how is this World Cup being covered by Mexican or diasporic media? Like, what is your
Mhm.
vibe there?
Well, it's really interesting because you think a lot about what the World Cup has represented in the past. Now, for those who don't know, Mexico has hosted the World Cup two previous times. So if we're talking at a sporting sense, what that means for Mexicans and Mexican Americans, they'll think back to the stories told by their parents, told by their grandparents about how in those two World Cups, Mexico made it to the quarterfinal stage. Now, Mexico has yet to do that. And a lot of the conversation that people are having is okay, now that there's another tournament on home soil, and obviously there's games going to be, they could possibly play in the US and if they go far, but they, people are wondering and dreaming, quite frankly, okay, if we're looking at the past, there's an opportunity to reach that quarterfinal stage once again. And speaking of looking into the past, that's also when you think about Mexico's manager, Javier Aguirre. This is the third time he's taken charge of El Tri, and that kind of has some symbolism there about how Mexico's looking towards the past, but hopefully relying on some players that could be their future in this tournament.
So, if that's the kind of the media interpretation of how this is on home soil, what would you say is your reading of the fans? Is there a big anticipation, perhaps
Mm-hmm.
criticism of the tournament? What's your reading there?
Oh, of course. I think if we're talking about the actual matches themselves, when the announcement was made about this World Cup that'll be in the US, Mexico, and Canada, from fans, it was quite obvious that a number weren't exactly happy about the fact that there doesn't appear to be an equal number of games being placed between the three countries. So I think that's immediately what comes to mind. I also think, though, when it comes to that frustration, I think it's kind of dissipated with each passing day. I don't, it's not really a big conversation anymore. It's not like people are feeling frustrated about the lack of the games. If anything, I'm seeing the excitement, unsurprisingly, increase significantly. And I think we could see that in the recent games in Monterrey and Guadalajara, where you had the final column, which was the intercontinental, interconfederation playoff spots for the final spots of the World Cup. And it was fascinating to see that even though, you know, I don't know what connection there really is between Mexico and Iraq. Maybe there is some sort of connection that I'm completely unaware of. But even though with with Iraq playing there, with DR Congo playing over there, like Mexican fans turned out and were incredibly supportive. We're incredibly thrilled. So I think that kind of gave us a little bit of an appetizer about what we're going to see in the game.
Cool. I'm gonna ask you to diagnose the state of Mexican football. Is it in
Yeah.
for both domestically and abroad? Perhaps you can include the national team in the answer. In other words, is it in a healthy condition or is it more off color?
Mm, I would say if we're talking domestically, if we're talking about Liga MX, and if we're talking about the men's side, I would say it has been in a stagnant state, but with an immense amount of potential. It has yet to reach the potential, but it has an immense amount of potential. What I mean by that is that there's a lot of renewed interest in Mexican soccer and Liga MX when you have investment from specifically the United States now coming into Liga MX teams. What's behind the scenes, what people are very excited about is that by the aim is by 2028 to have centralized TV rights, to have more centralized sponsorships, the more centralized approach to Liga MX. Now you think about what TV rights have done in the past for other leagues. Let's even use the Premier League. For reference, in I forget exactly when, the late '90s, early 2000s, that was revolutionary for the Premier League. I think people are now thinking, oh wow, this league, which is the most popular soccer league in not only Mexico but in the United States, things centralize, And if there's opportunity to elevate this even further, like what can Liga MX look like 5, 10 years from now? That being said, I think on the field, I think just across the board, I don't know if it's really made leaps and bounds and progress. I think that's kind of reflected in the Mexican national team, where for my entire life, I'll be quite frank, people have wondered, is the Mexican national team, is it going to be a part of the upper echelon, a part of the elite when it comes to national teams? And for the entirety of my life, Mexico's always been in that second tier. Where the U.S. are currently at as well, where you think about them as like, well, they're top 10 to 20, not 10, not like it spots 10 to 20. You know what I mean? Like spots 10 to 20, not a top 10 national team in the world. I think that's kind of where I see Mexican soccer, but I still think that there's a lot of potential.
Interesting. Okay. So as we know, the hosts don't need to go through the qualification process. They're already there. So what has the qualification time been? So what have you guys done in these friendlies or in any invitations that you've been in? Like how's the form?
Well, if you ask me in 2025, let's say November, I would tell you things look awful. I wrote about this recently, but in at the close of 2025, there was a 6-game winless run that represented the worst run of form for the Mexican national team, the men's national team, in over a decade. There were headlines that talk about crisis. There was one headline, I forget who wrote it, but they basically said Mexico loses to Paraguay and loses all of their credibility, and went on to this argument about why the Mexican national team was the worst national team in the last 50 years. Now, things have changed significantly since then. I think what's helped, I think a silver lining of Mexico having a number of injury issues, and which is obviously no team wants to have injury issues, but a silver lining from that is suddenly there are more roster spots. Like the race there is completely open for a number of key positions. So there's now been, I want to say, 5, 6, 7, 8 players who are kind of fringe / newcomers who have really, really stepped up in 2026, really boosted El Tri. And we saw that recently in the 2 draws against Belgium and Portugal. Yeah, they didn't beat either national team, but they were pretty competitive. And this was a Mexico side that's missing key players due to injuries.
So on the whole, or maybe more, even if you want to get a little bit more specific, do you think fans are happy with the manager and the style of play?
I'll think about what I was just saying there. In late 2025, no. Now, yes. It's amazing. It's amazing how much people can suddenly really, really back and support a national team as soon as results suddenly work in their favor. I think fans, for the most part, I think that there's also an emotional connection when it comes to Aguirre, Kevin Aguirre, a veteran managers coached in Europe as well. Someone who has a lot of respect in the Mexican game. So I think he's given a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt when he has stumbled a little bit. I mean, he was really wearing that thin in late 2025. But I do think that, like I mentioned, when people think about the World Cup, the upcoming World Cup, they think about 1970, 1986. When people think about Javier Aguirre, they're like, oh, that was a guy who was a firefighter of sorts for Mexico in the past, who picked them up when they're in a states of crisis and helped them qualify for World Cups. Can he doesn't have to be a firefighter right now. Now it's more so being more proactive, being more so on the front foot, if you will, when it comes to El Tri. And can he actually elevate El Tri this summer? I'm not sure. There's a lot of questions. We'll see what the injuries look like. We'll see what the health of the team is. But I think for the most part, fans do still like Javier Aguirre.
So as a neutral or just somebody who's not aware perhaps of the Mexican national team, are they fun to watch at least? Or is it hard work?
I think it's part of the Mexican soccer identity. You see that a lot in Liga MX. It's very attack minded. It's very focusing on possession heavy soccer. It aims to be very dynamic. Is it always dynamic? No. I was about to say it's dynamic, but that's still something that Aguirre and Mexican soccer still needs to work on. Is that dynamic style of play? But I think that's just part of the Mexican soccer DNA. I mean, Aguirre, it is
for sure.
interesting. I wouldn't say he's the most attack-minded manager when it comes to Mexican coaches. And I think that's because of his role as a firefighter in the past. And that means he also isn't afraid to sit back a little bit and go and be more practical. When he first stepped in with Mexico in his third stint, it was interesting. It was definitely kind of old school because it was just not cautious soccer, but it was more pragmatic soccer, and he was playing it in a 4-4-2. So that's like definitely kind of like a throwback, right? When you
Yeah.
think about that, he's no longer doing the 4-4-2. It's now more of a 4-3-3, and I think he's able to bring that pragmatism into when needed. But I think still part of the Mexican soccer DNA and the DNA for a lot of these players is to be on the front foot, to have possession, to really push forward, and not be so cautious. But we might see a little bit of that.
Cool. All right. So now I get to do the fun part and throw some proper nouns at you, which are so the standout names, at least that I think most people would know, is the Raul Jimenez, Edson Alvarez, Memo Ochoa. We're still doing this in 2026.
Right? Yeah.
So how are those dudes, like the guys that people would know from world football? And then maybe a secondary question to that would be, who from the supporting cast do you think are primed to have a good tournament?
Okay, so Raul Jimenez, he's having a renaissance in his career. Um, I mean, he's at this point, I think a lot of Mexican soccer fans, they would have assumed that he probably would have made a move back to Liga MX or back to MLS, ahead of a World Cup to really get some minutes because maybe he can't really cut it in Europe anymore. But he's still being an effective player for Fulham. Is he, yeah, at his peak abilities when he was at Wolves? Definitely not. This is a guy now who's close to my age, so that says a lot about how this is an aging player. But I do think that he has proven to be an invaluable leader and someone who's really invaluable in the build up to plays, who's willing to drop back, fight for balls, be a target man. He does so much when it comes to the involvement of build up to not just having to always score the goals, but he's undeniably Mexico's starting striker. Now, Edson Alvarez, there was a big question mark above him because he's recovering from an injury. This is someone who, on paper, you can make an argument that he's Mexico's most important player, someone who is in such a key position as a defensive midfielder that can drop back between the two center backs. Right now, I think I'm not entirely sure if he'll be 100% fit for the World Cup. I think even if he is 1% fit, though, he'll still get a call up there at least as a leader, just because of how important he is. So whether he's on the bench or whether he's in the starting 11, definitely still keep an eye on him as a leader for this team. And yes, you mentioned Ochoa. Ochoa's still around. What
Making everybody feel young, bro.
I know. What didn't help for those who wanted to move past Ochoa was that Luis Angel Malagon, he was kind of fighting for the number one spot for Mexico. He had an injury, I want to say about a month ago, that's essentially ruled him out for the World Cup. I still think that Tala Rangel, he's the Chivas goalkeeper. He's still the number one option in net for Mexico. But if Tala Rangel, if he has an injury issue, then I think there's a decent chance we might see Memo Ochoa once again. He'll make the roster. He's in the past, let's say in the Gold Cup, he seems to be more than happy just to be involved and to be a leader in the background. I think that is a more likely scenario. But if Tala Rangel has an injury, I think we might see Ochoa. We might see Ochoa getting minutes. And then, as you mentioned, some players in the background. I mean, I created a depth chart the other day. I think someone that people need to keep an eye on, and he's still, he returned from an injury. What did he return? Yeah, he was in the game day roster for Xolos over the weekend. So he's back. We'll see how fully fit he is by the time the World Cup starts. But people have to keep an eye on 17-year-old Gilberto Mora. I've seen him play live. I've interviewed him. This guy's been playing in Liga MX since he was 15 years old. This is a kid who broke records with the Gold Cup by lifting an international title at 16 years old. This is someone who it's amazing to see how incredibly smart he is as someone who could play as a second striker if needed, as a winger who can cut inside, as an attacking midfielder. His decision making and progression of the ball and ability to hold on to the ball, it's absolutely incredible. I was chatting with a scout in Liga MX who was telling me basically he's like Gil Mora is could easily become a Champions League level player, like easily. And he was like and that speaks a lot to how people think that this kid could be the next massive star for Mexican soccer. And it's only a matter of time before he goes to Europe. It's only a matter of time before the rest of the world learns more about him. And if he's fit, you'll probably see this teenager starting in the midfield for Mexico, someone who when I've seen, because I live out here in San Diego, so sometimes I'll take trips frequently go up to Tijuana to watch him play, and just to watch Cholos in general, to watch Liga MX. But something that's really fascinating about him is I've never seen a player whose head is constantly on a swivel, like
Like
he
Xavi,
just
just like
yeah, and it's just yeah,
constant
it's
checking.
just
Yeah.
it's amazing. I was like I feel dizzy when I watch him play. I just, like it's just constantly aware every single second, every single he's just moving left, right, looking left. It's just it blows my mind when I watch Kitamura. So he's someone to keep an eye on. I'm a huge fan of him, and hopefully he's fully fit.
I do feel like I remember seeing a stat that like the more a midfielder scans, the higher their pass percentages. There's like something like when
Mm,
they would
okay,
track Fabregas and Xavi and Iniesta, like these midfielders who are always looking and just scanning the pitch. There's something related to awareness and pass percentage. It's something like that, but I could be
that's
talking
fascinating.
nonsense.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Um,
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah,
it makes sense. What are Mexico's floor and what are Mexico's ceiling? I'm curious about that
as
one.
in as in like where they could finish in this World Cup.
Yes.
Um, I think I think it's a manageable group. I think that fans breathed a sigh of relief when it was Czechia that went through and not Denmark. Because if it would have been Denmark, then I think there'd be a lot more worries about this national team. I think the floor for them is second in their group, and if they're then second in the group, I ran numbers there. Yeah, if they're then second in the group, then they would probably go up in the knockout round against 2B. So that would be either Canada, Qatar, Bosnia, or Switzerland, which would be in LA. So that would still be a huge
Yeah.
home
It's a home
advantage.
game.
Yeah, I think I think the floor for them, it's probably that first knockout round match. I don't. I think I can't imagine them having any serious issues in the group stage outside of South Korea. I do think I see that has draw written all over it for me. I think that'll be a draw right there. So that could be the difference whether they finish first or second. So I think the floor for them, and especially if they have the home field advantage, and especially when you look at historically how well they do at home, the significance of this and what happened in 1970, 1986, I do think the floor of them is one knockout round match. I think the ceiling for this team, it's I mean it's all dependent on who goes through, what happens, but I think it is that I'm not gonna say semifinals. I think it's quarterfinals.
Okay.
I think that would still represent a win for Mexican soccer. You know, back when because now this World Cup has expanded, this mythological idea for the longest time was fans talk about making it to the quinto partido, the fifth game. The fifth game, yeah. So the fifth, for those who don't know what the fifth game represents, means you play 5 games of World Cup, and that therefore means that you qualified at least for the quarterfinal stage. That is seen, and that's Mexico, 1970, 1986, they qualified for that quarterfinal stage. I think of both those tournaments, they only need to do 4 games. But anyway, what's if Mexico were to qualify for the quarterfinals, I think that would still be seen as a massive, huge victory for them as long as they don't embarrass themselves in quarterfinals. I think at their best, they're capable of doing that. But against other quarterfinalists in the World Cup, I can't see them surpassing
Yeah, see,
any of
I was
those
gonna
teams.
ask the question that the fifth game curse or whatever it is was applied to the 32 team World Cup. So I was thinking if they win the round of 32 match, then they do get to a fifth game, but it's still the
Yes.
round of 16. So does it count
Yes.
if you make it to the round of 16? Is the curse broken, or is it
No,
solely about
no,
we need to
no.
make it to the
Yeah.
last eight?
It's more so of the quarterfinals than anything else, because it's more so that like the quinto partido is obviously the mythological curse, but that's just the road to the quarterfinals, right?
Right.
The actual goal itself is the quarterfinal stage. So I think that fans would obviously fans would love it, to make it to the round of 16 and play that fifth game in this current iteration of the World Cup, but everybody knows that the actual aim, the actual goal is the quarterfinals.
So what's your like deep down belief? Like this is the personal Cesar. Like what are you going to watch in a few months?
I think that they play two knockout round games and they get knocked out in the round of 16. I and you know what, and that's fine. I think that my immediate reaction was that's fine, and that is actually how I'd feel about that. That's not a failure. I think a failure, obviously, group stage exit is
Grouped.
is a failure. Yeah, group, yeah, yeah, or even third, finishing third and getting knocked out in the first knockout round. That's
Oh
still,
yeah.
I would say, a failure, especially World Cup at home. I I just think that with this Mexico team, it it just doesn't have the depth needed to really go far in this tournament. Yes, I'm looking at a potential starting 11, and if everybody is fit too, yes, I have faith in Raul Jimenez. I have faith in actually even down to a backup striker like Hormiga Gonzalez. I have faith in him. Gil Mora has been fantastic. Brian Gutierrez has really stepped up recently. I think he'll be going to the World Cup. Tala Rangel has been great. The backline, Vasquez, Montes. I think that the issue here is that beyond those players, when I start looking at players number 13, 14, 15, 16, that's when I begin to have my doubts about them. And that's when I begin to notice the limitations of this national team when it comes to their depth. So I'm going to say round of 16 exit, and it's okay. It's fine. Not a massive step. It's not a step back. It's not a huge step forward.
Two more to go. Who's your pick to win the World Cup then? If it's not Mexico,
um,
everybody will get this one.
yeah, I'm starting to think. I mean, I think the easy answer is like it's Spain or France,
Okay.
right? Because for the exact reason that I was just, and maybe it's because it's my mind right now, but I think in these tournaments, especially now, one in which you have another knockout round, like those players 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 are be so crucial, so vital for these national teams. And it's just when you look at the roster that either of those national teams have, it's incredible. I mean, I was even, who was it? Someone posted something recently where they were talking about, I was like, oh, this is the French B team. And like, yeah, the French B team, yeah, they didn't do too poorly. And I was looking at the starting 11. Oh, yeah, it was Philippe Auclair, like the journalist. And then I was looking at this B team, and it's like, oh, yeah, like Conte, like Desiree Doué, guys from Juventus, PSG, like Man City. Like it's just incredible the depth that they have with Spain and France. So yeah, either one of those.
All right. And is there anything I haven't asked you about the Mexican national team that you think is important, interesting, that people might know or might want to know? Is what I mean to ask.
Mm, I'm looking at my notes here. I think the one thing, yeah, I think it's just keep an eye on the injuries. My predictions of how far Mexico can go or a possible failing they can have is highly, highly dependent on the status of their injured players or players who recently returned from injury. Like I mentioned there, the depth with Mexico, and they can't afford to have a team that's struggling when it comes to a healthy team. So Edson Alvarez still out. Rodrigo Huesca, somebody who was playing Champions League minutes with Copenhagen and arguably could have been the starting right back. He's been out for a few months now. We don't know if he'll be ready in time for the World Cup. Mateo Chavez, who is playing over in the Eredivisie, arguably the starting left back or the backup left back. He's just returning recently in Eredivisie play. Gil Mora, he's back from his injury. and is yet to get any minutes just yet for Cholos in his return. Chino Huerta, someone who's arguably a starting option, the left wing or on any of the wings. He is also waiting to return from his injury. Santi Jimenez got some minutes earlier today with AC Milan and played, I want to say late last month too, but we're still waiting to see what he looks like. So my overall feeling about how Mexico will do, it'll be really dependent on how healthy a lot of these players are, and we'll see what that looks like next month. Next month when late next month when Ngidi is taking part in those final friendlies.
Cool. Well, Cesar, I thank you for taking the time to talk to me. It's been fun as always. Are people going to be able to catch you around?
Yeah. I'll be in Mexico City. I'll be in Guadalajara. I'll be in Monterrey for the World Cup. If you see me out there, say hello. And it'll be fun. It'll be interesting covering Mexico, covering a few other national teams that'll be out there. So it'll be an exciting World Cup, and we'll see how it goes for El Tree.
Cool. All right, man. Thank you.
Most definitely.
My name is Njabulu Ngidi. I'm a senior soccer writer at News 24 in South Africa.
Cool. All right. So let's start here. Like, how do you feel this World Cup is being covered by South African media, in particular, like journalists and whatnot?
There's been a strong sense of enthusiasm because it's been a long time since South Africa qualified on the pitch to go play at a World Cup. The last time we ended was in 2002 in Korea, Japan, because South Africa played in 2010 as host. So it's been a long time coming, and I think this qualification is the culmination of the resurgence of this team. Since Hugo Broos took over, he took over a team that was, the games where the team was playing in front of 1,000 supporters. The support of Bafana Bafana was, which is the senior national team in South Africa, was at an all-time low. And he transformed the team by taking it to the Nations Cup, where they finished third, went back again, qualifying back-to-back, and they reached the round of 16. So qualifying for the World Cup is like that sign that this team is on an upward trajectory. So there's been a strong sense of optimism and euphoria in the country where it feels like Bafana Bafana are on track to be where they belong.
If I could maybe split the kind of journalist media expectation, which I find tends to be very pessimistic, and you said there's anticipation. How is the populace feeling? How are the people feeling about this upcoming World Cup?
South Africa, I think that's the tricky thing with this national team is that South Africa does not do middle ground. We either believe we're the shittiest team in the world or we're the best thing since sliced bread. So there's never really in between. And I think that's been part of the challenge in terms of giving a true sense of where the team is at. So there's a strong optimism in certain quarters in that this team can go to the next round, which is something that South Africa have never achieved before. But there's also an element that says that qualifying is the achievement. It shows that the team is progressing. Looking at the teams that are in the group, there's not a lot that should be expected for this team to do because the core of this group has never been at a World Cup. So it's like, okay, the team has achieved by going to the World Cup. The realistic objective is the next AFCON to say, can we challenge and win that? And then after that, look at doing something in the World Cup. But what makes that, where the two come together, is the fact that in this World Cup, you don't need to be in the top two teams to advance. 3 points could be enough. Looking at that, some of the best that teams can go to the next stage. So that's where there's really converging like ideals come together and say that yes, we're not world beaters yet, or that optimism that is there to say, okay, but we could at least do something, finish third at worst. And I think that's also even something that the coach has been hinting, that the team's target of going through might not necessarily be 1 and 2 in terms of strength, but we could sort of sneak in as one of that best placed teams.
So if I could maybe get you to put a stethoscope and a doctor's outfit on and all of that, What, and I'm asking you to diagnose the state of South African football right now, both domestically and maybe some foreign exports. Do you think South African football is in a healthy place, or is it in perhaps off color place?
It's in a healthy place, but it can be better. It's in a healthy place in the sense that, I mean, you've got Mamelodi Sundowns at the moment, who are in the semi-finals of the Champions League against Esperance. They were in the final last season, and last year we had three teams in the last four of the CAF tournaments. Pirates and Sundowns were in the semi-finals of the Champions League. Stellenbosch were in the semi-finals of CAF. So there's this. I think the success of Bafana has dragged everyone involved in South African football to sort of get behind our teams. I mean, locally, we're seeing a high number of games that are played in front of sold-out crowds. Our young players are doing well. I mean, the under-20s are the reigning under-20 AFCON champions. They went to the World Cup where they progress from the group stage, where they were in the knockout stage. So South African football is in a healthy position in that the teams are doing well, especially senior men's teams are doing well. There's a good number of players that are being exported, even though it might not necessarily be in some of the most glamorous leagues like Mbogazi going to America and Deterjan also going there. But it's a sign that the world is watching and it's seeing progress. So it feels like South African football is in a healthy position, but it could better. It could get better in the sense that, I mean, Sundowns in last year's Champions League should have won that final. They did everything right, but not take advantage of their chances. And that is the problem that it's the biggest thing in that even at the Club World Cup, Sundowns played well against Dortmund, even against Fluminense, but they didn't take their chances and they were punished by teams that are on a higher level than what they consistently face. So it's a problem that we've had for quite some time. And I think it needs collective thought in terms of how to fix that. So South Africa is in a healthy position, but it's not where it can and should be because, I mean, after Morocco, South Africa is probably the strongest league in the country. It's in the continent. It has invested quite a lot in the game. I mean, it has world-class facilities. When you look at where South Africa is in terms of what it has, it should have done more than where it currently is. I mean, continentally, we only have 2 titles at club football. The national team has only won 1 major title, and that was 30 years ago in 1996. So in terms of return, it's not where it should be.
So let's get into qualification. How was the qualification process? It wasn't smooth, but you guys got through. So if you could maybe explain to the people how qualification went.
South Africa doesn't do smooth, man. We like the hard way. Because, and that's the scary thing is that this qualification was probably South Africa's best. It was flawless. And I use the word flawless in quotes because there was obviously the issue of that yellow card where Tebogo Mokoena played in a game when he was supposed to be suspended and the team was 3 points were taken away from it. But they still managed to top a group. They had Nigeria. They had Rwanda, who are a tough team to face. And we also had 2 neighbors, Zimbabwe and Lesotho. And whenever you have those derbies, you might be strong in your zone, but they're always tricky because they want to upset you. So it on paper, it might look easy, but in terms of the challenges and what Bafana had to answer, it was tough. And then there was also Benin, who were coached by a very experienced coach who had taken Nigeria to the semifinals of the AFCON, won a bronze medal there. So it was a tough group, but I think in this group, that's where Bafana showed their progress because they start well against Benin. They win their first game in the qualifiers. It's something that they had not done in over 20 years to win the opening game of the qualifiers. But then go to Rwanda and they lose in a game where they were outplayed. And the conditions, yes, impacted that because they were bad. They were playing on a swimming pool, masquerading as a pitch. And that got into the players' head because before even the game had played, they were complaining about how hectic the traveling was because the team had to go from Durban to Joburg to Rwanda, and then drove, I think, for like 3 hours from Kigali to where they played because they were not playing in the main stadium. And Rwanda were not playing there because that stadium was under construction. But because of the mentality that sometimes we have that people are out to get us, the complaint was that they wanted to fuck with us mentally, and that's why they took it on our way. And once those complaints started and they had this thing that everyone is out to get them, that's when they lost for me. I think they lost that game before they stepped into the pitch. And the result was not surprising based on how much complaining was there. But that game was the turning point because that's when the team switched up mentally in terms of not complaining, but whatever they face, they stomach it and then win. And I think that was a good learning for this team because then after that, they go and play against Nigeria in Uyo, and Nigeria, have dominated South African teams in every facet from under 17 right to the senior team, and even in the women, they've dominated us. If there's a team that South Africans would choose not to play against, it would be Nigeria because of just the dominance in terms of head-to-head. Bafana goes to play that game in Uyo. There's a strike in Nigeria where the airport is closed earlier, so the team has to sleep in an airport, even though they chartered a flight, but they can't get to Uyo in time. They sleep at the airport and then have to go the following day. So there's a lot of issues in terms of getting there. Not a single word of complaint when it was justified, because when an airport is closed by a country that's hosting you, it's hard to argue that they're not doing that to mess with you. But Nigerian team also had the same problem. I mean, they couldn't move. Some of their players arrived, I think, a day before the game or just hours before. So the problem also affected them. But Bafana did not see that as people testing them or being out to get them. They took it as another hurdle and they went and played in a draw, which was a great result in Nigeria in their own backyard. But I think the game that cemented where this team is at was when they played Nigeria and Bloemfontein. The Nigeria of Lukman. Yes, Osimhen was injured for that game, but Nigeria still had probably one of the best squads on the continent. And in that game, Bafana had 6 regulars who were unavailable. Mudau could not play because he had issues with his club, and because of a contract, and the coach decided not to play him because of that, to say that he refused to train while that, and was like, I understand those issues, but I draw the line at you refusing to train, because you can have issues, but if you're not training, then that's something else. So he could have picked him, but he dropped him. And Mudau is probably the second best right back on the continent after Hakimi. And the 2 centre backs, they're injured. So in that game, Bafana in the back 5, they had a 19-year-old who was playing only his second game at international level. And Ngidi, who was the most senior but had just played under 30 games. A right back who was making his first international appearance. And other couple of changes because of injuries, that they should have been dominated by Nigeria, but they did the dominating. And I mean, the Lukman goal was the goal that Nigeria scored was a handball. So what Bafana did was Nigeria came at them physically, and it's something that Bafana struggled to deal with before on the continent, but they stood toe to toe with Nigeria and fought physically. So they overcome their mental challenge of wilting in games like this. They brought the fight to Nigeria and overcame so many changes, and they got a draw. And that showed that the team was on the right path when it can perform like it did. So, yes, there were issues behind the scenes in terms of administratively, but on the pitch, it was flawless, because on the pitch, the team lost once and they dropped points only against Nigeria. And in terms of how they've performed, this has been their best qualification, and it shows that the team is in the right path.
Are they trending in the right direction in the recent friendlies since qualification? Like whatever they've done in the last international break or two?
I think the Panama friendlies were a wake-up call, and also a reminder. I mean, there was nothing new in those games, because at the AFCON, the issues of dealing with set pieces is something that Cameroon really punished Bafana from, because of that's how the goals came in, and that's how the team was knocked out. And the issue of not taking our chances, that's how Bafana drew or lost to Egypt, who were there for the taking. I mean, Bafana are the better team. So Panama reminded the team of the challenges that they have. And that game, that's why I think in the realistic sense, that's why we should not necessarily expect much from South Africa at the World Cup. Getting into the World Cup is that progress. And now they need to learn in terms of what is it that you need to do consistently against the top teams in the world. Because Panama are not a world beater, but they are a tougher opponent than what Bafana have constantly faced. I mean, Panama, in the space of 4 years, 5 years since Bruce took over, Panama are the third non-African team that South Africa have played against. The other is France and Andorra. So it shows that we've been playing a similar type of opponents. And when you go to the World Cup, you need to face a diverse opponent, group of opponents. I mean, you face, because there we're going to face the team from North America, we're going to face a team from Europe, and we're going to face an Asian opponent. And this team has not faced Asian opponents leading up to the World Cup. So the friendlies showed where the team is lacking and what is it that they need to work on to be competitive at the World Cup.
So now I get to the proper noun section. So what is your overall assessment of Hugo Bruce?
He's changed South Africans' lives. I mean, if it was up to us, it probably would not even leave after this World Cup. I think he's had his challenges, and there were a lot of butting of heads when he arrived, because he came as an AFCON winner, but he was not a brand name, and South Africa loved brand names, and that's why even the coaches that they were being associated with, they wanted someone who came with that name and aura. And Bruce was the opposite. There's no aura, there's no brand. It's just an old man who speaks his mind and is not afraid to offend South African sensibilities if it disagrees with him. And I think a couple of things that is done right in this team, he's improved them mentally in terms of facing any challenge that they can face, and not necessarily lose a game before they step on the field. Because that's been the challenge for South Africa before, where they lose games because of where they're at mentally, either thinking that this opponent is something that they can just walk all over, and then get surprised when they face stiff competition from we've been upset by the likes of Seychelles, Mauritania. There've been quite a number where South Africa won before they stepped onto the field. So he's improved that, and also even when we play against strong teams, there's a strong belief that we can beat them. And the other is that he's made this team united. For the longest time, and it's still the case now, where the national team is viewed on club allegiances, where people are like, okay, Team X does not have any players like Kaizer Chiefs, for instance, which is the most supported team in the country. And some fans say they can't get on board on a team that does not have Kaizer Chiefs players. So there were those divisions, and that led even in the players where there would be cliques that these players hang with these ones and these ones hang with these ones because of who they play with. But now everyone is united and they won and they fight for one. And there are two examples that show that unity. When Relebo Mofokeng made his debut for South Africa, who is an exciting 20-year-old, who's one of the most exciting players on the continent in terms of what just he can do on the field. A week before he made his debut in Bloemfontein in the World Cup qualifiers, his team had beaten Sundowns in the final, and he scored the goal to beat Sundowns in the final. And it was a big setback for Sundowns. But the two players who prompted Bruce for Mofokeng to get his debut were Sundowns players. One was the captain, Ronwen Williams, who nudged Bruce that this is the right environment. When South Africa playing, I think it was Zimbabwe, playing against Zimbabwe in front of a sold-out crowd, they're controlling the game. This would be a good opportunity to introduce the youngster. And Bruce agreed, and fans got excited when he was warming up. And because there was not much time, Tebogo Mokoena played the ball out to allow the substitution so that he can get a taste. And those were people who were fighting. I mean, the Sundowns Pirates rivalry is one of the most heated. It used to be a blood sport. game, like because of just how tense it is. But because those two teams supply the core of Bafana, there's a strong sense of brotherhood that yes, they compete, but when they don the national team jersey, we fight as one. And that unity is something that I think is going to carry the team for years to come. And that's what makes them a threat even at this World Cup, that they might not be the most talented, they might not have big name players, but they are united and they fight as one and they don't give up. And I think that the Panama woke the team up, and that's the type of aggression and spirit that they're gonna come with at this World Cup, to say they're gonna fight for each other, they're gonna want to show the world. And I think they are in a good position where they have to prove something, because when this team arrives confident and with high expectation, we saw at this Nations Cup that they can't handle that because it became too high. So now they're used to this underdog tag where very little is expected from you, which I think bodes well for the team, because the only way they can go is up.
I'll fill in the blank. If player blank plays well, South Africa will play well.
If Thembazwane plays well,
Okay,
then South Africa is going to the next round. He is the heartbeat of the team, and this is going to be his swan song. Rele is probably the heir to his throne in terms of that number 10 role, and they love him. Like, I mean, when we qualified for the Rwanda game, for me, what was one of the most memorable moments in that game was Sipho Mbule, who got into that team because Thembazwane was injured. When you saw Thembazwane coming on to celebrate with them, the sheer excitement, and Sipho Mbule even said, like, we're only now missing you in this team. And this is someone who knows that if Thembazwane is there, he's probably not starting. But that joy and just seeing him, and even Urele, just when he sees him and what he brings to the team is something special. It's even beyond what he offers on the pitch. And if the real Thembazwane shows up, then Bafana is going to be something in this World Cup.
so let's get the expectations then. So what is South Africa's floor at this World Cup? And what is their ceiling? And then kind of attached to that, what is success? Like, what does success look like, however you define it?
I think success would be advancing to the next round.
Okay.
It's something that this team has never achieved, and that would be a first. So if they can do that, then that would be success, because then after they get to the next round, however far they go, then they would have exceeded expectations. So success is that it's making it to the next round, because yes, it's easier, but just the fact that you haven't done it, and it would be a first, it would be a huge psychological boost for this team. And I think the flow is getting to the World Cup. I mean, the challenge for this team has always been to qualify. When you look at the number of World Cups since 2010, they missed. I mean, they didn't go to Brazil, Russia, Qatar. And in Qatar, they were close, because if they could have topped their group, had they been better finishers. And that's how Ghana ended up being the one that represents the team from South Africa's group to go to the playoffs against Nigeria. So they were close in the Qatar World Cup. And this, in terms of, even with, and it says a lot about this team, that they've struggled so much to qualify for the World Cup, and they were able to control a group so much that even taking away 3 points did not affect where they ended up. That says something. I think a lot of what was expected and what South Africa wanted, this team showed in the World Cup qualifiers. And if we view the World Cup with honest eyes, and we're not overawed by the occasion and whatnot, then getting there is the first step. I think if we want to have higher dreams and expectation, it should be at the next World Cup, because you can't miss out 3 World Cups and then expect to come there guns blazing and thinking that you're going to make it a force. I mean, look at Italy, for instance. Look at the amount of years that it's taken them to struggle to get to the World Cup. And that shows how tough World Cup is. World Cup qualifiers, it does not matter where. And that's why Gattuso is smoking his socks when he's saying that Africa doesn't deserve to qualify, regardless of where you add. Qualifiers are hard. So I think getting there is they've done better than what they were at. And I don't think the expectation should be higher than at least getting out of the group.
I have 3 more to go. Who's your pick to win the World Cup?
I oh, that's a tough one. But I think France.
Okay.
I think when you look at the talent that they have, it's just ridiculous. I don't think there's any other team in the world that can compete with them pound for pound in terms of talent. And I think losing the World Cup like they did in Qatar is something that is fresh in their minds and is one of the things that is driving them to go and do one better and then sort of get their second World Cup in 3 editions. I think for me, they're the favorite because the talent and the determination in terms of how they lost that World Cup. I mean, when you play like you did, because it's always a cliche in football to say that we gave it our all. France really gave it their all, and they finished second. And I think they're going to come back stronger and more determined to try and go back there.
This is a purely selfish question. So I didn't have it, but now I'm thinking of it. Okay, so one of my favorite things to do, like every season, is to go on YouTube and watch the highlights of the South African Premier League and the step overs and dribbling with the knees and doing all the fun stuff. So I want to know from your perspective, what are the cultural elements in South Africa that produce such seeming fun and skill and just kind of the atmosphere that allows that to happen? Because in other countries, people would be getting red cards and you're disrespected, but in South Africa, it seems fine. So what are the elements there that produce such moments?
I always find it interesting when you play against international teams and they whistle at you, because when they whistle in other parts, that's them basically. It's equivalent of booing. But in South African people whistle at you, that means you've done something well. So if you were to whistle at a South African team, you are motivating them rather than putting them off. But I think in terms of that, it's largely come from. I think it's 2 things. Firstly, football in South Africa, especially growing up with apartheid, is that it was one of the few things that offered that control and pure joy, because so many things have been taken away from you, so many things you've been stripped away of your identity, and everything. I mean, even your home. But that's the one thing where, between those lines, everyone is equal. And whether you're white or black, and then football has been multiracial even before South Africa gained freedom. So football has led the way, and it was even used as a tool to fight against apartheid, whether it's like meetings when people were banned from having political meetings. So football is the biggest source of sort of expression for South Africans, where you can sort of show, yes, you might not have certain things, but here on this pitch, you are boss, you can show people what you can do. And it also, I think, not having resources, because most of those skills, it's people from townships, Ekasi. So where you play there, you play wherever you can find a patch. Some even play on a tar road where cars are passing and they have to make way. So you don't have goals per se. You either put a shoe there or something as a target to hit. And in that scenario, scoring is the joy killer, because in most cases it would be like if you get to 2, the game is over. So it's all about just purely expressing yourself. You've got so many confined spaces that wherever you're playing is not good. It might not even be even. There might not be a pitch. So you have to improvise, and that's what not having much has sort of taught, because most of our players come from conditions where they don't have much and they have to improvise. So everything is that improvisation that you have to beat your man. But the crowd comes there not to see you score. They want you to entertain them. And that's why some fans want that and they get excited by that more than the goals, because they want to be excited. Like, win, but like they want excitement. I mean, one of the 2 most dominant clubs at the moment, Sundowns, who have been cruising in the league, or have won the league dominantly in the last 10 years. They've won 8 championships in a row. And they were on course to even win this one. Their fans were not happy because their coach was playing conservative brand of football. And some wanted him gone, even though they were number one in the league, in the Champions League, ready to go to the next stage, but they wanted him gone. Pirates, the same. The coach who won them their first domestic treble was Ruud Krol, a Dutch coach who played this scientific, disciplined, and measured way. If you ask those fans who they'd remember fondly, Krol or Papic, who finished twice in back-to-back season behind, like in second place, most of them would say Papic because of the brand of football they played under him. It brought them joy. So I think it's that thing that we want to be entertained, and that's what the crowd wants. It's pure. It's almost similar to what you see in terms of the gladiators. That spectacle. That's what they want, and I think those factors shape, and that's how you see that the type of football that South African plays, to our detriment in certain instances.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. All right. Last question. Is there anything I haven't asked about South Africa, South African football that you think is important, relevant, that people should know or might want to know?
I think it's so in terms of this World Cup, yes, in a lot of environments, getting to the World Cup is the destination. In terms of this is what you work for 4 years to get there. But this team, this World Cup is part of returning to where they once were. This World Cup is not the destination. It's the other step in terms of going to where they feel they should be, and it's part of their growth. And I think that's why that, yes, they could do something and surprise, but the bigger picture in terms of this team with even the age of these players, I mean, there's a possibility that you could have 2 center backs who are under 25 in the opening game of the World Cup, in Ime Ocon and Mbogazi. Ime Ocon is in Germany for Hanover, and Mbogazi is in Chicago Fire. So you can see that this is a team that it's still on a journey in finding itself. I don't think they've reached the ceiling or where they belong. The World Cup is just I think more than anything, it's a good eye opener of this is where you're at, and this is the level where you need to be among the big boys.
Njabulo, this has been really, really good. I thank you a lot for doing this. Where can people follow you one last time if you want to be followed?
I think thanks. I'm on Twitter at Njabulo, and they could read my work at news24.com, which is one of the authorities in terms of news publications in South Africa. And there's also been a strong investment in terms of our football coverage and ensuring that what is done in terms of the news side of things, we can mirror that in terms of football and what we're able to do.
Oh, cool. This has been really good. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thank you, man.
Thanks for having me, man.